Welcome to Silberman Law Firm's Weekly Docket, episode 43, where we talk legal news and practical law. Today is November 7th, 2024. I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the firm and your host. Austin Black is my co-host, and we have a special political show this week. We're a couple days after the election, and we're going to answer legal questions surrounding the election and Donald Trump taking office and a little bit more. So, Austin, you geared up for that?
I'm geared up, Phil, but I don't really know how I can just get through this show considering I woke up with less rights than I had before his election. That's a common thing I see on Twitter right now. Oh, I woke up with less rights than I had the day before. What are you talking about? What rights did you lose? This is crazy to me.
Well, I'm hearing a lot of crazy stuff like that too. The left and the Democrats are certainly agonizing over the Trump victory, but we're going to tackle some questions that's on everyone's mind, maybe left and right. So We'll see how that goes.
And center, if you still exist.
And center, not a lot of center out there. All right, what's on our docket today, Mr. Black? What are we answering today?
So first, we'll be answering what happens to Trump's criminal conviction in New York. What happens to Trump's federal classified document case, where he was taking classified documents and holding them at Mar-a-Lago. What did voters think about Texas's largest bond proposal in the state's history? I wonder if viewers can guess where that is. But then what is the status of the House of the Representatives race and a fact related to how the House seats are allocated? How many times did Kamala Harris pass the bar, and how many other presidents I don't think we're really covering vice president, but how many other presidents have taken the bar multiple times? Why Colin Allred, the person running against Ted Cruz, why his voting record was too liberal to give Ted Cruz a competitive race? How Latino voters shocked Democrats and added to the GOP dominance. I have a lot to say about that from stuff on Twitter. And then, will Joe Biden pardon Hunter Biden? What we think.
Yeah, and that's a sampling of some questions, some of the biggest questions we're seeing across the news and the internet, and we thought as lawyers were uniquely qualified to answer some of these. One correction to our docket, it's how many times did Kamala Harris take the bar, not pass the bar? And that could be my fault because I think it's in the show outline.
Oh yeah. She could have passed the bar multiple times, right? Because usually if the situation usually is, if you take the bar in another state and then you move to California, one of the few states that doesn't have reciprocity in a very separate bar exam, you do have to take the bar exam again. So
yeah, you could pass multiple bars. But no, we'll be talking about how many times she took it and other kind of famous political figures that may have taken it multiple times as well. All right, let's start our show with our first question, which is what happens to Trump's criminal conviction in New York? So we talked about this in a previous show. You might remember that Trump was convicted of 34 felony counts in the state of New York related to paying hush money to Stormy Daniels. That's a porn star.
Yeah, in case anyone didn't understand, we just elected a felon to president, okay? So just to clear that up, yeah.
Right, very clear. All right. It made Trump the first former president, to be convicted of a felony. Certainly the first president-elect to be convicted of a felony.
Just breaking records right and left.
He's scheduled to be sentenced November 26th. Okay, coming up. We've got a sentencing of a president-elect.
Man, he's so lucky the election happened before. I wonder if that was done on purpose. Anyways, go on.
All right, now the easy, we got to get the easy one out of the way. All right, he cannot pardon himself. And why is that, Austin?
Because it's a state case.
Yeah,
you can't pardon. Yeah. Governors can pardon for state offenses, but presidents can't. So.
Yeah, good luck getting the governor of New York to pardon President Trump. So
you saying Trump is not well liked in New York?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Stuck with the state felony conviction in New York, he can't pardon himself. So what's going to happen? There's no direct precedent on imposing a sentence on a president-elect. The judge in this state case, he's got a couple different options. He could sentence Trump to a fine, no jail time, to say you get fined. 2, the judge could try to put him in prison, but that would certainly be suspended while he served in office at the very least. Or he could suspend the sentence until he's out of office.
So look, Hear me out, okay?
Yeah.
I think we should use this as a prime opportunity to address the prison industrial state in the US. I think that we should have a president serving as president while in prison, like from a prison cell. I think that would really just help us understand more about how just privatized prisons are and then the problems around that. Help everyone.
You know, that was a Trump trade, right? You're familiar with all these Trump financial trades that were made betting, and that was a big Trump trade, was investing money or betting on private prison stocks, right?
Yes. So yeah, it's terrible. It's so sickening. Anyways, different.
We digress, but
it would be funny if we had a president in prison.
Yeah, somewhat for a little while anyway. All right. So the Department of Justice determined that a sitting president cannot be indicted, prosecuted, or jailed for a criminal claim while in office. And the department based that decision on the principles of separation of power, which basically means that you can't have the judicial branch interfering with the executive branch. And for the judicial branch to say, okay, Mr. President, go to prison, that would clearly be an infringement on the executive branch. So indicting, prosecuting, jailing a city president would violate that separation of powers doctrine. And that doctrine applies, those rulings apply to all criminal prosecutions, both state and federal. Now, under that doctrine, there's even an argument that under those opinions, the cases against Trump must basically be dismissed, including the state cases. And that's a possibility that could happen. So the judge could do something crazy, try to put Trump in jail or whatever. That's going to ultimately get appealed up to the New York appellate courts. That could ultimately reach the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court has already granted Trump sweeping immunity in another case, or at least significant immunity. Right. So I've got no doubt that the U.S. Supreme Court would agree with use the separation of powers clause to overturn that if it gets appealed. Those are all possibilities. Nonetheless, I think this is very good for Trump. I think Trump is in the driver's seat here. If the New York court tries to continue with the prosecution or even impose a stayed prosecution where they say, all right, we're gonna stay the prosecution, maybe sentence you in 2029 after you served, I highly suspect those decisions will be reversed on appeal.
Yeah.
That's what's going on. Now, if you read the left-leaning news media, to prepare for this show, I went on Google and I just did a search. Yeah. And I was like, what happens to Trump's criminal case? All the most liberal left-leaning news outlets that come up in Google search results first are talking about all these other possibilities of Trump serving time and, how he could potentially actually be sentenced for this kind of thing. So I don't actually think that's possible. I think that's a bit misleading by the left there.
I agree.
So what happened? That's a state case. Now the federal cases are pretty easy. Remember, he had that federal.
So I think it's a pretty easy concept that if something says like top secret or classified, you don't take it to your like home residence and just keep it laying around in documents, especially after you're out of the government. That's very strange.
Austin is reminding us of that case. That's allegedly what he did. Yeah. He took a bunch of boxes to the Mar-a-Lago residence and they asked for him back and he refused to get him back. And there's all these photographs of these boxes. Apparently Biden did the same thing. Maybe not to the same extent, but Biden had him at his house in Delaware.
I just really hope like all of the documents Trump took were like about Area 51 or something like that. Like he's just really interested in aliens.
There's a lot out there on that, the UFOs and all that kind of stuff. I think it's mostly Chinese and Russian sort of spy apparatuses that are floating about that are being identified as UFOs. But
maybe.
But back to the story back to the thing we're talking about, Special Counsel Jack Smith. All right. He was appointed as special prosecutor, special counsel to prosecute Trump in this classified documents case. And that was in a Florida district court. And the Florida district court judge dismissed the case, arguing that under the Constitution, the executive branch actually has no authority to appoint a special counsel. Jack Smith, of course, immediately appealed that federal court district decision, and it's pending on appeal while the election just happened, and obviously Trump was elected. So now the question becomes, can it go forward? And the answer, there's really no debate here. Jack Smith, when Trump takes office, he's going to immediately fire Jack Smith.
Well, that's the thing. He's not going to need to, though. But the Justice Department has already said he's going to be gone before that.
Yeah, and Jack Smith probably doesn't want to be fired. He wants to spare himself that disgrace.
Yeah,
I think those cases will be non-suited by special counsel.
Why did no one think of Jack Smith when they were voting? So sad.
So sad for Mr.
Poor
Smith.
guy.
It also is more likely that Trump will just pardon himself anyway on the federal stuff because he does have that power. Those are federal crimes he's being prosecuted for. So Trump absolutely has the power to pardon himself on that. All right, that's an easy one. So we're done. We knocked those out of the park on that. That's what's happening with New York state law case. You got all the federal stuff that's going away. All right, switching gears here a little bit, completely onto something different, local results. We're talking about what did the voters think about Texas's largest bond proposal in the state's history. This kind of blew me away. $4.4 billion, that's billion with a B, the Houston Independent School District asked for to renovate its facilities. You're a DFW guy, Austin. You don't know a lot about Houston ISD, but it is the largest school district in Texas, and it's the 8th largest in the United States. So this is a big operation. Now, it's getting smaller because inside Loop 610, central area of Houston, the population growth has been diminishing for many years, and people just aren't sending their kids to Houston public schools that much anymore. But
I wonder why.
Yeah, it's got a lot of problems. The Houston Independent School District had so many problems that the state of Texas, you may have heard about this, Austin, the state of Texas actually had to take over the school district. School districts are normally run by locally elected board members and officials and superintendents. The state of Texas said, and I guess the state has this power, that they were so corrupt, so problematic, the state had to come in and take over the school district. So the new superintendent, I think his name is Mike Miles, he said, we need about $4 billion to rebuild elementary schools, rebuild facilities. And normally, for many years, all of these school district bonds have passed, like overwhelmingly.
Yeah.
And Austin, when you go to the polls, you're a nice guy. I know you. Yes, you are, Austin. You're a nice person. And when Austin Black goes to the polls and he sees a school district, if you think about all the children and how the children need textbooks and how the children need facilities and the children are our future, Austin, you would never, Austin, you would never vote against a school district bond, would you?
No, there would be a scenario where I would.
Okay. You're not alone because the trend of all school district bonds being approved has recently been reversed.
Yeah.
And that's largely in part to these very lavish athletic facilities. If you're ever driving around the suburbs or I drove up, I think I was driving somewhere and Miss Cy-Fair ISD, I'm local to Houston, so Cy-Fair ISD is a big offender. I think Tomball ISD is a big offender. They have stadiums, Austin, that would rival many colleges for their high school sports.
Yeah.
The voters saw these things go up. Have you ever seen anything like that in the DFW area?
I have. So Carroll School, South Lake is like that. Yeah.
Okay. Apparently, it's really started to upset some people, starting to wonder, why do we need these facilities to play high school sports? So that was one thing, but the real kicker, the real kind of dagger, rather, in the heart of these school district bonds is there was a little known law that passed in 2021 that said school district, if you put a bond on the what do you call it, the polls to vote on, right? If you're going to put it out there for the voters, you have to tell the voters that the approval of a bond is going to come with a tax increase.
Yeah, you would think that would be like a natural assumption, but apparently not.
People don't know.
I thought it was just going to come from nowhere.
Right. People don't know what a bond is. There's all kinds of confusion with bonds.
It's James, right? 007?
Yeah. Now,
I'm voting for a school bond. Isn't that guns in schools like I want?
Now, I think most of our listeners are fairly well educated because it's a legal podcast. We have a lot of lawyers. It's an academic podcast. But for some of our listeners who are maybe not as well educated, or some of our viewers on social media when these things got to TikTok and YouTube and all that, A bond is actually borrowing money. And to pay for those bonds, you have to get the money from somewhere. The school districts have revenue, and that's a tax that comes from ad valorem property taxes. So all of a sudden, when they put that down there, that you'll be taxed on this, people stopped passing them.
I'm surprised this one got 42% of the vote.
Yeah, 50. Austin's pointing out 58% voted no. So that means that 42% voted yes.
Yeah.
But compare that to 2012. What happened in 2012, Austin?
In 2012, 66% voted in favor.
Yeah, and that was the last one. This was the first school bond totaling $1 billion or more to fail.
Yeah.
But as we mentioned, a lot of problems with HISD. State took over in June of 2023. A lot of people don't like this Mike Miles guy who's superintendent. A lot of people want it to be run by the local government, local board, but that's not happening anytime soon. Okay, next question. What's our next question, Austin? What do we got next?
House of Representatives. It's the one area of our electable government that is still up for question as to who's going to control it, because obviously Republicans control the presidency, they control the Senate. They flipped 3 seats at the moment. They may be flipping more, not sure yet. But the House is the only one where the Democrats may have a chance of getting the majority, but it's looking like the GOP is going to handle it. So
yeah, looking like GOP is going to stay in power on the House. And that's as of this morning, Thursday, November 7th, 2024.
Bill, did you see that? I think it's Congressional District 17 in California. It's Huntington Beach area. It looks like that's going to, and that was marked as like securely Democrat by most pollsters. And it's looking like that's going to go for Republicans. That hasn't gone for Republicans since 2003. Unreal.
Yeah. There are a huge number of districts and areas that are just flipping the GOP that have not. You want to talk about crazy?
Like the one in Texas, Starr County, the largest Hispanic county largest percentage of Hispanics in a county in the entire U.S., 97%. It has not gone for a Republican in 132 years.
That's incredible. Incredible. The most incredible thing I found out of that I heard was the state of Michigan will now have 1 Republican senator, and I don't think that's happened for 3 decades or so. I don't know how long, maybe longer, but the state of Michigan is going to have a Republican senator. But all right, we digress. We got to stay focused. All right. House of Representatives, 435 voting members. That's currently how many House reps you have. Article 1, Section 2 of the United States Constitution says that each state shall have at least 1 U.S. representative, and the total size of the state's delegation, the representation in Congress, is based on population, right? Now, I always thought that meant just population of U.S. citizens. But it turns out that it's actually total population. So if you live in a place like Houston, where I live, you have tons of illegals. Every 10 years we do a census. So if we have a huge number of illegal aliens, we're going to get more representation in Congress, even though the illegal aliens technically are not entitled to representation, right? They can't vote. Did you know that? Did you know that, Austin?
Well, okay. So just because someone can't vote doesn't mean that they're not entitled to representation, though, right?
Okay.
And I don't know. I would need to look into that more. I go back and forth on whether or not I think that they should be counted or not. So
okay, that's interesting. Obviously, the Democrats want them.
Sure, obviously, the Democrats would want them to be counted. Yeah.
Want them to be counted, and the idea is that the Democrats think that immigrants typically lean left, and they're going to vote Democrat. So
they're gonna disagree with that now.
We're getting to the Latino thing, but that's actually different. That's actually a little different. This is probably a pretty true common thinking that
for sure
illegals are coming in. They're going to vote Democrats. Democrats want to put illegals in certain areas, get more representation in the House, control the House. I just learned this, and it was shocking to me based on population. I always thought it was population of U.S. citizens. Now, when Donald Trump was elected in 2016, this was the first thing he did was he made the census. When you do your census every 10 years, you can only count U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
And then when Joe Biden took office, that was the first thing. He repealed that and said, no, count everybody, count the illegals and everybody. So this is a game that's been going on for a while, but I just learned about it. I thought it was a really cool fact, and I think I think something people should know.
Agreed.
All right, what's our next question, Mr. Black?
Yeah, how many times did Kamala Harris take the bar and fail to pass it? And how many other presidents have failed?
She's in good company. So she once, right? She took it once, failed, took it twice, passed it.
Yep.
And this sort of got us thinking about other presidents or presidential candidates, political figures that failed the bar exam. And I was surprised by some of these. John F. Kennedy failed the New York bar exam twice, failed it twice, passed on the third try. Who else, Austin, do we have on this list?
Hillary Clinton failed the D.C. bar. Michelle Obama's on this list. To be clear, Michelle Obama has not been president.
No, it's not just political figures.
Sure. Our heading for it, though, says other presidents that have failed. As of now, Michelle Obama has not been president.
Right. Yeah. Hillary Clinton has obviously not been president either.
Yes, but a candidate, right?
Candidate.
And then Franklin D. Roosevelt passed or failed the New York bar the first time. So.
Yeah. Now, interesting coincidence. I noticed that the list is all Democrat, Austin.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think the list, must be coincidence, I guess. This happened to all be Democrats on the list. All right. All right. Did you follow, next question, did you follow the Colin Allred, Ted Cruz race at all?
Vaguely. Okay. I will announce here on the show, you know what? I voted for Colin Allred. Okay.
That's okay. That's okay.
And the reason I voted for Colin Allred, he was the very first Democratic senator I've ever voted for in my entire life because I absolutely hate Ted Cruz with a burning passion, man.
Was that because he left us? He left us. That was all of Colin Allred's campaign.
Yeah.
Was that he left the city of Houston when we were freezing.
He left the city of Houston while we were freezing, but no, that's actually not my biggest issue. My biggest issue with Ted Cruz is he's the lawyer, obviously.
Right.
He consistently will misrepresent Supreme Court decisions to his constituency, knowing that he's misrepresenting them to get them riled up about things. And I hate that so much.
Okay.
He does it all the time. And I know Democrats and Republicans do it, but it was more of a protest to it. I didn't really think Allred was going to win, but I was like, I'm not voting for this guy.
I thought it was going to be a really close race.
I thought it was going to be a lot closer than it was.
And this was basically a landslide. And I wanted to take a deep dive into this because I wanted to know why it was a landslide. And apparently it was his voting record that really did him in. And he was just way too liberal to try to take a Senate seat in Texas. They need to, Beto O'Rourke or whatever, they really need a moderate Democrat. If the Democrats want to have hope in Texas, they need a moderate Democrat.
I would have done fine if he didn't just come out and say, hell yes, we're going to take your guns. I was like, oh my God.
Did he say that?
He did say that, yes.
They don't, he clearly is not good at lying about what he wants to do. We had Ann Richards. Ann Richards was a Democrat. You don't remember Ann Richards? She's the reason Baylor. Okay, you need like a moderate. She was an alcoholic. She got Baylor into the Big 12. Did a lot of great things.
I'll do good work for this country.
The whole Ulysses S. Grant kind of thing. But all right, so let's take a look at Colin Allred's voting record and see really what the problem was. This Border Act of 2024 got a lot of attention. It was, you hear Border Act and you think, oh, yes, this is a good thing that Republicans want. But it was really more of an amnesty act, like a pro-illegal alien act. And people figured that out. Ted Cruz really hammered him on this, okay?
Yeah.
Ted Cruz opposed the Border Act. Colin Allred was a proponent of it. Just Republicans said it's going to be really ineffective. J.D. Vance, I don't know a lot about J.D. Vance. I'm going to learn more about him. But he explained that the border security bill on the Joe Rogan podcast and basically highlighted some points. They were going to cap the number of undocumented immigrants at approximately 1.85 million. That sounds like a really big number. That was the cap. And you used to be an immigration attorney. Does that sound like a big number to you?
So I wouldn't be able to actually say because what I did was really specific in corporate immigration.
I see. You were letting the skilled ones in, like that we wanted all.
I was letting all the good ones in.
The good ones in. You didn't do any work for any like cartel members and criminal guys?
Not normally. I did do pro bono work for people seeking asylum.
For cartel members?
Yeah, for only cartel members.
Okay, good. Just clearing that up.
Yeah.
All right. And Ted Cruz also said this thing codified the catch and release policy, which just allowed them to remain in the United States all the time while they raided the case adjudication, which could take like 15 years. So Texans were not for that. So Cruz said this was a mass amnesty bill. Yeah. And I think it was, and Colin Allred voted for that, and it really got hammered on it, and that was a big thing. So Texans didn't like it. And then moving right along, Equality Act. All right. Are you familiar with this one? Have you heard of this Equality Act thing? I have. So Allred voted in favor of this. It didn't really go very far, but really got lit up in the state of Texas on this. He wanted to pass. It sounds good on the face of it. It was like, okay, no discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, gender identity in various areas, employment, housing, and education. There were some religious exemptions for like churches and things like that. I think what really upset people is he wanted to enforce the act. He wanted to have these federal bureaucrats enforce it. He was going to grant authority to the Department of Justice and the EEOC for basically enforcing this Equality Act for Q and transgender, whatever. And that was going to be a kind of thing where like maybe in a public place, if somebody wanted to use a girl or a women's restroom, they could. And then all of a sudden the EEOC was going to be able to come and hammer that and hammer that business owner or whatever. Yeah. And that Ted Cruz really highlighted that incredibly well. I think that's the biggest one that sunk Allred is really what I think. Right.
I got to say, if you can't beat Ted Cruz in Texas, that's pretty crazy.
Your vote for Colin Allred was really just a vote against Ted Cruz from what I hear.
It was just a vote against Ted Cruz, absolutely. Yeah.
He's not well liked. He really isn't. And I don't know what to say about it.
It's crazy to me that the Democrats cannot find someone to run actually against him, because I think you run a candidate that's not insane and he'll win.
Probably. And then reproductive rights. Allred supported, they call it reproductive rights. In the old days, we would call it pro-choice, pro-life. Yeah. And shortly, Allred supported abortion.
No, don't call it pro-life. Call it forced birth.
Forced birth. Oh my!
Have you not heard that? Now they use forced birth like they had no choice in the act that led that.
I'm glad.
The majority, the 99% of them do. So
I'm glad I was forcefully birthed. I'm happy to be forcefully birthed. I don't think Texans like that one either.
Probably not.
It was really, I think Donald Trump did this the right way. I think when they were asking him about it in the debate, he said, look, I didn't make abortion illegal on a national, federal level. I just gave it states' rights. Yeah. And I'm not sure how Ted Cruz handled that or if he handled that in a similar way or not, but that did not work. All right. That's why your candidate, Colin Allred, is not the senator today, Austin.
He's not my candidate. He's just not Ted Cruz.
Okay. The vote against not Ted Cruz. All right. Next question. You take the lead on this one. You're passionate about that.
Yeah. Usually the GOP has lost the statewide Latino vote in Texas by over double digits. And in this election, that shifted not only in Texas, but nationwide.
Shocking shift. Big shift. Trump captured 55% of Latino voters in the state.
In Texas, yeah. And he won 14 out of the 18 counties within 20 miles of the border, which is double the number he got in 2020.
People, for our non-Texas people out there, that's the Valley, okay? Yeah. The Rio Grande Valley. It is predominantly Hispanic. It's all Hispanic. So
yeah. It's just insane.
The biggest shocker to me was he was the first Republican president in 30 years to win Miami-Dade County. That's where all the Cubans are. And he won Miami-Dade County.
Yeah, that's crazy. Democrats have gone full mask off on social media, though, on this. Like, I saw stuff like, we need to have a very uncomfortable conversation about Latinos in America, about Latino men in America. And, I hate all Latinos. Like, I saw stuff like that, like on Twitter from like Democrats. And it's insane. Entitled these votes.
There was something similar. Are you familiar with an ESPN? You're not a sports guy, but I think there's an ESPN analyst, and I want to say his name's Stephen Smith. Okay. Mm-hmm. And he was blaming like Oprah Winfrey and Michelle Obama for turning black men against Democrats, because they would do something similar that you're talking about. You're talking about Twitter and people trying to influence these Latino men to go out and vote Democrat.
Yeah.
And Oprah and Michelle Obama trying to go out and influence these black men to go out and vote Democrat. And you're basically saying, okay, Latinos and black guys, if you don't vote for Democrat, then you're not with us. And that's the last way. And Stephen Smith's point was like, that's the last way you must not understand black men, because that's the last way you're going to try to convince a male to vote for you.
Just like men in general, like when you have a major like talking point of a lot of people in your party being that like men, like straight men, are evil, misogynistic, every single one of them. You keep telling them that repeatedly, and then you act super surprised when they don't vote for you. I don't know. I'm not super surprised.
Yeah. He also, this is going back to how crazy this was and how well Trump did with Latinos. He doubled Latino voters in Pennsylvania from the last time he ran. And Pennsylvania, when I turned on the election and I saw around 10 p.m., I think Pennsylvania had some large percentage in. And that's when I knew Trump had it. And all the Democrat pundits started to panic because they knew there were not enough votes in Philadelphia to counter the rest of conservative Pennsylvania. So
obviously I didn't know this for certain, but I thought it was done when I saw the returns in Florida, where Trump was up 15% from his votes in 2020. I was like, that's crazy. Then that was not any polling. No one expected that. And I expected it to repeat throughout the nation, and it did.
No, so. We've got a quote here where we're trying to understand why Latinos came out in favor of Trump. And there's a guy, Joshua Blank, and his title is Research Director for Texas Politics Project at the University of Texas at Austin. And read the quote we've got from what he said.
He said, in places like Texas, many Latinos, quote, think of themselves as multiracial, unquote, and have grown up in communities where race and ethnicity are not top of mind. He thought Trump targeted Hispanic men who rarely vote by appealing to, quote, their pocketbooks, to their masculinity, to their place in culture and society, but not directly to an identity as a racial and ethnic minority. So.
Yeah, and that's been a prevailing theme we're hearing, not just with Latino voters. And they're saying that was a big mistake in the Harris-Walz campaign, because Kamala Harris would come out and she would try to identify as a black woman.
Yeah.
And what these cultural professors and the experts so-called, they would say, well, completely missing the mark, because Americans don't see themselves defined by race anymore. They see themselves as kind of multiracial and defined more how these Latino men are thinking. They're not seeing themselves as Latino or Hispanic or against the Caucasian or that different from the Caucasian race. Americans aren't seeing these racial lines that were once very divided, for example, in the civil rights movement. So not saying
I'm not sure if that's I'm not sure if I would say that. I think quite a few Americans still see things like that. But I think the majority of the country, as shown by the fact that Trump is winning the popular vote, I think the majority of the country doesn't right now. I think that's right.
These are the experts. I don't profess to be a sort of cultural or societal expert, but they're saying that was the mistake that Kamala Harris made in her campaign. So,
Phil, I just on this point about the shift in mostly younger men voting of all races, J.K. Rowling tweeted about the election. She tweeted a few things about the election, but specifically there was one. To make no mistakes is not in the power of man, but from the errors and mistakes, the wise and good learn wisdom for the future. Plutarch. He said, judging from my X feed, a lot of progressives think the only mistake they've made recently is failing to call opponents Nazis often enough.
That's clever.
Yeah.
All right, we've got to move on to our last question. All right, and this is what's on a lot of people's minds. Will Joe Biden pardon Hunter Biden? I know you say no. Austin says no, but
maybe he could. I was telling Phil before the show, I think it would be great if Biden did not pardon Hunter, but instead he preemptively pardoned Trump. And they just come together in friendship. And then Trump, when he comes into office, his first act is pardoning Hunter. That would be so cute.
That would. You're going to have to trust. You would have to trust. Well, but let's back up. We have to remind people. June 2024, Biden unequivocally said he would not pardon his son or commute his sentence. That's when Biden was still running for president. All right. And Hunter Biden's currently facing convictions for tax and gun charges. Right.
Yeah.
And remember, most presidents do all these last minute kind of clemency grants. It's very common as you're the outgoing president. You do a lot of pardons. There's some rumors that this pardon list has expanded. Maybe potential pardons are Bob Menendez. He was a senator convicted of bribery, and he was caught with all that cash and gold. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York. Remember, we did that piece, Austin, where Eric Adams was like flying first class on Turkish Airlines and getting free hotels in Turkey in exchange for allowing the Turkish consulate to skate by on code violations in New York City. What's the pardon list going to be? Is it Hunter Biden? And I love Austin's theory. We're going to bring the country together, by having Trump pardon Biden's son. And then.
So I don't know if you know this, but there, in internet culture, there's a big, movement that showing that Trump and Biden are actually really good friends, and they've just been pitted together, pitted against each other by these two parties. They just don't want to fight. All they want to do is just sit down and play Mario Party together. There's AI voiceovers of them playing Mario Party.
I think it's probably a little bit like lawyers, how people want their lawyers to have all this hatred for one another, but oftentimes, I play golf with this one guy who's opposing counsel on several of our cases throughout the year. This doesn't really matter. That doesn't mean we're not zealous advocates in court, but in many ways, our friendship makes cases get settled a little bit more easily and get better results. But this is really a legacy question. If it were your son, would you pardon him in Austin?
No.
No, my wife says she would pardon our children. I would take it like a fact by fact kind of thing. If it really weren't crimes that harmed anybody, obviously victimless crimes. And how young enough is the kid? Does he need to learn this lesson?
Wait, okay. These are just tax and gun charges. Yeah, if it was tax and gun charges, I'd pardon him.
Pardon him, yeah. If he's fair, we don't know.
Something where it would be a case by case situation, though. I wouldn't just say yes. I absolutely would. If it was something like he murdered someone, no way.
No, yeah. We'll see what Biden decides to do. What Joe Biden decides to do on this. That's going to be very interesting. All right, those were our top questions we were seeing on the internet. Kind of people wanted to know. So hopefully this show has done a service for that. That brings our show to a close. I've been your host, Phil Silberman. Austin Black has been my co-host. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcasts. Nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice, and this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a legal question, email us at info@silblawfirm.com. That's info@silblawfirm.com. Tell us you want it publicly answered in the podcast. So.
And remember, Democrats, if you want to win in 2028, just keep calling people Nazis for the next 4 years. So,
sound advice. Everybody have a good rest of the week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.